Hello everyone, welcome to the channel again. So today we will be studying about reader response literary theory. Before starting the introduction, let me ask you one simple thing. Have you ever read a story and felt so good after reading it that you suggested it to one of your friends, and after they come reading it again and they respond like this was okay? You must have felt offended. Or we can take different situation in which we can assume that you read a book at the age of 15 and then you again read the same book at the age of 25. When you read at the age of 15, you felt nothing after reading the same book which you read at 25, where you cried reading each and every lines, you underlined everything, you felt like this is the conclusion of your life and this is with what you feel most relevant with. So that is the reader response theory which we will study today. It comprises of one main thing, that everything is not locked up inside the text. Meaning arises when the text and the reader encounters. It is basically the encounter of the text and the reader which is the main focus of reader response theory. As we are proceeding with each literary theory step by step, if you must have remembered that when we studied about new criticism, we read in that there should not be the personal emotions, author's life, biography or historical reference. They should focus only on the text. Even they called a term for the personal emotions affective fallacy. For example, if you read at that point of time, if you read something and you expressed all your views, all your emotions through the writing, and you show it to your professor and they say this is the fallacy because you involved your emotions with the text. Like that is what was happening. And now when reader response theory came, at that point of time it says that text can't exist alone. It is the reader and the text. Together they fill some of the gaps and they create some new meanings. For example, we will start with the first key term, that is transaction, which was given by Louise Rosenblatt. She says that there is some of the fact that is given by the text to the reader and another some of the facts that are given from reader to the text, and together they made some new meanings. For example, she refers to the two types of reading, afferent reading and aesthetic reading. By afferent reading we mean when we read something to take some information or data out. For example, when we read newspaper we take information out. Or aesthetic reading is something which means we read something just to live some experience, to enjoy something. That is aesthetic reading. Louise Rosenblatt, she forces on aesthetic reading to produce great literature. The second key term here is by Wolfgang Iser, which is implied reader. He forces on one of the fact that when a writer is writing some works, he imagines some fictional audience and he writes keeping in mind that those audience is the target. Now, if some person has to read Victorian novels, then he must have been well acquainted with the Victorian social status, Christian principles, English classes, all these things. That's when he can understand what the novel means of the Victorian novel, of the Victorian society. And on the other hand, if a person who is a newbie and he doesn't know anything about Victorian society and he starts reading the Victorian novel, then he will not understand as the same level with the person who can understand, who is well aware with the Victorian morals. That is what Wolfgang Iser says with the term implied reader. Wolfgang Iser also says that every text is full of gaps. By gaps, he says He also called gaps as blanks. He says that every text has some of the blanks with which the reader has to fill in according to their experience. For example, when Franz Kafka wrote The Metamorphosis, he says that George Samsa just woke up and turned into a giant insect. He didn't say that what exactly it was. It was upon to the reader that they had to imagine according to their imagination that what could it be. It could be a beetle, it could be a cockroach, it could be a camel, it could be a lizard, it could be anything. It is upon to the reader, and it was an intentional invitation to the readers to think according to their perspective. That is the gap which Wolfgang Iser says and explains. The next we have is H.R. Ho's horizon of expectation. Now, horizon of expectation can be defined as something which we have, the expectation which we have before reading a book, before watching a movie, that this movie or book will turn out like this way. Now, H.R. Ho says that a reader must shock when he sees a movie or reads a story. Like the writer should shatter their expectation with which they read the thing and watch the story. That is horizon of expectation. So for a great literature, the writer must shatter their expectations. The next thinker is Stanley Fish, who introduced interpretative communities. He says that each of us are taught to see perspectives from the same organizations. For example, from the very early of our childhood, we are taught to see things. We didn't used to see things the same way which we are seeing. The vocabulary, the organization of words, all of these reading strategies are taught to us by school, society, organization simultaneously. So when these things are taught to us, then the perspective which will emerge from these will be similar at some point of time, because all of us are taught in the same way. That is interpretative communities. In the end, reader response theory focuses on one fact, that reader is also the part of the meaning making process. We can't consider that the text is only generating the meaning and the perspectives and all the system and patterns. No. It is a combination of text and the reader which is creating things. Because after writing the work or the text, it is upon the reader that in which direction he wants to move the needle of the compass. So in reader response theory, it is all about the perspective, the directions that a reader is seeing, and the response and reaction that a reader is giving. That's all about reader response theory for today. The notes for reader response theory, it will be attached in the end of the video. I hope you enjoy it. See you soon in the next video.